Hello, this is Ignacio from Fast Microservices. Today we're going to talk about one question that always comes up regarding microservices, and that's how big do microservices have to be, or how microservices need to be. That's a question that comes up a lot, and I would like to explain it by developing three scenarios that we definitely don't want to have. All right, so let's talk first about why do we want microservices in the first place, okay? Microservices are good for enabling the deployment of different parts of a system separately, okay? So that's the main point. So the first risk that you have is if you have a very big microservices that require the intervention of more than one team, then each of these teams will need to synchronize with other teams in order for us to be able to deploy. So the first thing is dependencies. This is the first thing that we need to avoid here. Dependencies are not sometimes so easy to see. Sometimes you have a team that's developing a framework or a library or a part of the system that the other team needs to use to complete their own microservice. So that's where you can find dependencies as well. It's not like not necessarily on functionality or on business functionality. The second problem we want to avoid is when you have tiny microservices that don't make sense separately. If a microservice doesn't make sense separately, that means that if you want to add features to it, if you need to remove or change or patch something, your change will affect a number of the microservices. So that's the second thing that we want to avoid. Those are microservices that are too tiny. The third thing that we want to avoid, the third scenario that we want to avoid, is when your microservices are so big that deploying them may require a lot of acceptance testing, right? So too big. When microservices are too big, they stop being micro, right? That's the first thing. But what does it mean? I mean, what it means is that deploying the new changes that you may have on the set of functionality may require a lot of testing again. So you're back at square one where you wanted to implement microservices in the first place to try to cope with that and be enabled to deploy quickly new solutions, patches, or new features to your system. So let's wrap it up. You don't want to have microservices that have dependencies among different teams. You don't want to have microservices that are too tiny, because remember, microservices need to be supported in different versions at the same time. So deployments may require a lot of new versions of a lot of new microservices in that case. And finally, you don't want your microservices to be too big so that parts of this microservice need to be tested again and again while the other parts are the ones that are changed. So again, you want to avoid dependencies among teams. You want microservices not to be too tiny because that makes it so deployments are big. And you don't want them to be microservices to be too big in the sense that they incorporate things that don't change and things that change often. Why is that? Because you don't want to have to test again things that don't change when you deploy your new parts, or at least not with the same frequency as you do for things that change often. This is basically what I have to say about the size of microservices and 3 things that we should avoid when creating them. I hope this helped, and keep in touch.